Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's edition of Seconds Out Live. I am your host, stepping into a warm, creviced seat, which has Danny Flexen's rear end in here. A bit of a weird analogy, a bit of a weird start to the show, but I'm your host, Ayman Khan, joined by today in my seat, I guess. I hope it's still a little bit warm there for you, Josh. No longer the work experience boy. You've been out and about. You've been getting the scoops, doing things that we'd expect of you and doing them really well, Josh. Let's get straight into it, actually, first of all, because we haven't got it on the topics, but you were there in Altrincham for Pat Brown's debut. How was that?
It was good. You know what? For a debut, really, really good. It's a unique setting to be in when you go to a show and the main event is a six-rounder, but it's a debut of someone who's being so well backed by Matchroom Sam Jones. And yeah, I was impressed with the performance. It was a lot of much tougher debut than what we were expecting for him. But gave all the right signs. A great crowd for him. I'd like to say around 1,500 people there for him. So yeah, I was really impressed, and I think there's a big future ahead for him. So yeah, very impressed with the whole card. I thought it was a really entertaining show on Friday night in Altrincham. I was enjoying all the fights there. So another good next gen series by Matchroom, I'd say.
Very impressed with Josh, and we hope we leave you very impressed by Seconds Out Live this week. And there were good signs in Altrincham, and the signs we need from you are a thumbs up by clicking the like button, a subscribe button as well too, and leaving your comments, questions, and answer to the poll as well. We'll have a poll coming up for you guys to contribute to in the chat. This is truly the most interactive boxing podcast or show, however you want to phrase it, on YouTube. So please do, your contributions are key. Get them in throughout this episode. And we'll go into our first topic, and that is the latest news that the IBF have ordered Daniel Dubois to face his mandatory, which is now Derek Chisora. And Del Boy has welcomed it. He wants Dynamite Dubois. He's not shirking for it. He's not afraid of it. This is one of the fights he wants on his hit list. And you can't really blame Derek Chisora for wanting the fight, I guess, because it's a world title fight. It would command a high fee, and it would command a big spotlight. A spotlight, maybe even Tottenham Stadium or Wembley, something along those sort of lines. And a fighter of his position right now, who's closing the curtain on his career, he said he's got 50 fights in him, and he's drawing near to that finish line. Wants the biggest and best fights he can get. The other one he wants there is Oleksandr Usyk. And he'd get a route to Usyk by beating Daniel Dubois, wouldn't he? Because he have a piece of the heavyweight puzzle. And as you put the pieces together in the puzzle of the heavyweight boxing landscape right now, you remember that Frank Warren has mentioned that Daniel Dubois is going to return back in the UK for a big fight. Is that Oleksandr Usyk? Would they want to bring Oleksandr Usyk being the still, I guess, in many people's eyes, without the belts, but still the undisputed heavyweight champion? Would he want to come back to the UK? Would he want to do something over back in Poland, as close as you can get to Ukraine, or would he have a fight over in Saudi Arabia? That might not seem likely, but if Dubois has to have something in between having the fight with Oleksandr Usyk, if they're not to make the fight with Usyk for the 4 belts, then that might be the type of fight that Dubois takes, or Parker. I'm sure Parker's got a lot to say about that, given that the fight fell through in the very last stages of the fight week. But that's the conversation right now, is that the possibility is that Derek Chisora could be taking on Daniel Dubois. And I want to get the poll in right now, right at the start. I want to know what you guys think about the fight and the prospects of, well, who's going to win. Is it Daniel Dubois or Derek Chisora? Could Derek Chisora spring the upset? So those are your options as to who's win, not the method of. I just want to know what you think about who goes into this fight as the person that will end up with their hands raised. So the choices are, of course, Daniel Dubois or Derek Chisora. Let's get to you, Josh, here, in your opinion. Hearing this news, what do you think about the fight, and what do you think about the prospects of Del Boy springing an upset?
I'm not a fan of the fight, if I'm being truly honest. I'd love to see Derek Chisora go out and fight for a world title for that 50th and final fight, but just not Daniel Dubois across the ring from him. We've seen how big of a puncher and how devastating of a puncher Daniel Dubois can be. And I just think at this stage of Derek's career, when we can go back for years now and see how many people have been calling for him to retire. I remember showing my real age here. The first ever show I went to was Parker versus Chisora 2. And after that night on the drive back to Nottingham, all I was seeing on social media was just people calling for Derek to retire, and that was back in 2021. Here we are in 2025, and Derek's still knocking him out. And fair play to him because he's been racking up some good wins as of late. But I really don't want to see him go in there against Daniel Dubois. I think that's the last thing you'd want for Derek. I know he could probably go in there and make it very tough and very awkward, but all I could see is eventually Daniel Dubois hitting him with a big straight right hand that renders him unconscious, and it's the last thing you want to see for Derek. So I'm not a fan of it. I give Derek a bit of a chance, given the fact it's the heavyweight division. Anything can happen. One punch can change it, but it is almost basically a puncher's chance for Derek Chisora. If I would honestly, I'd rather see Usyk in there with Dubois. I don't think Usyk is obviously he's nowhere near as devastating as a puncher as Dubois. I think Usyk would just make it very tricky for Chisora in the sense of he'd just be puzzling him with awkward movement and a lot of punches, but I don't think he'd do the same damage that Dubois could do to him. We've seen Derek already have 12 rounds with Usyk, and he made it tough for Usyk. I don't think he could make it as tough for Daniel Dubois, and I think it's too big of a risk to take at this stage of Derek's career, for not in terms of money and where it leaves him after the fight, but in his general health and well-being. If he wants to go out and be able to enjoy that money, I'd say avoid Daniel Dubois at all costs, in my opinion.
All right, I'll give you my take shortly. Let's jump into the chat and see what you guys are saying. Get your poll votes in right now as Daniel Dubois takes in a quick lead in the poll right now. But that poll will continue till the end of the show, so do get your votes in. So we have here from Ainsley Shand. Oh, please. I can't quite read at the end of that, but I'm a big fan of Chisora, but he won't pull that fight off. He will get hurt. Just got obscured by the poll there, so couldn't quite read the full version of your contribution there, Ainsley. St. Andrew says, let Chisora go out with a bang. 50th bout and a title shot. Let's go. St. Andrews is well up for those two colliding. MB says, this is a bad idea for Del Boy. I'm sure a lot of people agree with you, MB. Thunder Road says, I don't see Chisora retiring after 50 fights. There are going to be enough fights and money on the table for him to not turn down. Very good point. How am I supposed to get the viewers and chat to hit the likes when the live is tardy? We're here now. Appreciate us while we're here. Maybe it's time. It's the time change back to a 5-hour difference between UK and East Coast USA. Jack Dutton on the 45 says, once again, the IBF tried to split things up. Ra Hokum says, afternoon. Afternoon, Ra. Ra, you were saying that on Twitter that you felt there was a way that Derek Chisora could upset the odds. What is that way? Let us know in the chat and we'll read it out. Jack Dutton also comes back here with, what do we want to see? Usyk Dubois for the undisputed title this summer or Dubois versus Chisora? Ra Hokum comes back and says, if Stan Dubois isn't in his son's corner, Derek wins. Okay, sees that Stan Dubois being a key figure for Derek. If he is absent in the corner, then Derek has a real boost in his possibility to get the win. Ra also says, Josh looks older now. The job does that to you. Do you feel older? Do you feel a little bit more tired? A little bit more? You've gone the Joe Markowski. Joe Markowski came in. He had this stunning look about him with his long hair, and then afterwards he looked a tired figure in the sport. Do you feel tired, Josh, from the role?
Not at all. Not at all. I'm still ready to go. Plenty of more fight weeks coming up for me. So it's not caught me just yet. I'm sure it will soon, but not just yet.
You just got to wake up earlier than me, haven't you? If you wanna really speed through.
I've been waking up quite early recently. I've been on a real health kick recently. 11 o'clock bedtime, 7 a.m. wake up, get the day started nice and early. I'm telling you, I'm a new man now.
You know what you should do, Josh? Have you seen that trend of the fitness influencers who wake up at like 4 a.m. and they
the one who's been putting his head in like water and ice and everything, and then rubbing banana peel on his face?
Have you done that?
Not yet. No, I might give it a go tomorrow. Might set myself a real challenge.
No.
Go do God knows how many hours of running, then jump into a pool and land 4 minutes later. That's been the big takeaway from that meme. So
there's a true insight into the day in the life of Josh Hart there. Right then, back to the comments. Jack Dutton says, so much, don't want to see Dubois Chisora that I might not buy it. Who knows if it's pay-per-view or not? Imagine that. Alba, behave. Dubois could have Horace Shipman in his corner and still beat Chisora. Okay. Surely the IBF will give Dubois special clearance to fight Usyk. DB Cooper 1, good to see you in here. DB Cooper 1, one of the regulars alongside Ra, Jack Dutton, and Thunder Road and more. DB Cooper says here, Dubois versus Chisora in a big world title fight. Imagine telling someone that a few years back. Boxing changes like the wind. True, and it's gotta be said here, Derek has worked himself into that position. So you get yourself in that position. Are you really going to say no to a title opportunity? Although Derek has said clearly that he's not really bothered about a world title. I imagine that fight and Usyk are his two biggest paydays outside of a Tyson Fury fight, which he's not going to get for the fourth time, or an anti-Joshua fight, which he seems like he, I guess, is open to it, but doesn't really seem like he properly really wants it. So what else out there is there for him in terms of paydays? Ra says, I wonder if it's an Uncle Frank conspiracy. Got Triple D to pull out of the Parker fight knowing Bacoli would step in and lose his IBF mandatory position, so Derek takes it. Thunder Road says 50 plus watching and only seeing around 10 likes. Chat and viewers, don't forget to hit the thumbs up. Hit the thumbs up, says Thunder Road. You're enjoying the weather right now, but if you get on the wrong side of Thunder Road, you might find some thunder near your road. Rahokam says Derek would put up a better fight against both Triple D and Usyk than AJ and Fury would. Usyk now has both AJ and Fury souls locked in boxing purgatory. Thunder Road says, did you two already spar? I haven't seen Josh since I last asked. Maybe Ayman made him fall on his leg like George Groves against Froch too. No, myself and Josh Hart haven't sparred. I have sparred in the boxing media world. I have sparred Donna Corby, Jack Fig, Danny Gilfillan, and Jonathan Nagyo for pro boxing fans. Those are the ones I sparred. Josh hasn't quite tasted the 1-2 punch from the Khan-anator here just yet. Rahogam says Triple D would KO AJ and Fury in 2 rounds, barely breaking sweat. Josh, I shouldn't forget to mention, you've actually been in the ring before, haven't you?
Yes. Yeah. I have.
Go on.
What do you want to talk about? What, my fight?
Yeah, well, yeah, that's what I'm getting you to.
I'm sure we've already done this before. I'm sure I've already
well, let's remind them.
Well, yeah, I stepped in over a year ago now. On BoxRec, I would be classed as inactive. But yes, didn't go my way that night. I thought I won. There's a link to the fight. It's still out there. You can go watch it if you've got 4.5 minutes to spare afterwards. That's how long it lasted. Not because it went inside the distance. It was just a really short fight. I got robbed. I put on a beautiful Lomachenko-esque performance, really, just beautiful boxing. And then got robbed because the referee just clearly doesn't like my beautiful skill. So yeah, we go again.
So you can really sympathize when a fighter doesn't get the decision, because you've been on the wrong end of one, right?
Oh yeah. Like I already felt bad for him before, but after going through it myself and just knowing how it feels, just you've done all that hard work, 8 weeks of pure graft, just to not even get the credit you deserve at the end of it. It's heartbreaking. It is really heartbreaking. I've been labelled the artist now by some of my mates because I drew. So I need to go and get my one back in the ring soon, please.
What you should do is you should post-fight interview yourself and step back and forth in front of the camera to ask yourself.
You know what? At the time, I didn't have that idea, but obviously I had to fight. I think it was a week before I started with Seconds Out. I think my last weekend before joining Seconds Out, I spent getting smacked up in a ring. So no better way to spend your final weekend before starting a new career. So yeah, might have to do it again now that I've got the beautiful interviewing skills that I've learned here at Seconds Out. Give that a try. Next fight, I'll interview myself afterwards. Or Ayman, you come to the fight and interview me afterwards. Whack it on the channel. I'll sort out the media accreditation. Just get yourself there.
You know what? Danny Gilfillan rang me up the other day and said, yeah, actually, we should interview Josh Hart after he fights next. So if he's not ahead of me in the queue, I'll be sure to be first. Jumping back into...
I think I'll make it a huddle, to be honest. I'll be wanting to get out afterwards, so you might have to scrum it out.
Right, then, back into chat here. So Triple D with KO AJ and Fury in 2 rounds, barely breaking sweat. That's what we got to last time. 8 beautiful Golden Dragons. 8 is Des from Boxing Signing coming on soon. Thanks. I didn't get to Des. Forgot about your comment. As long as myself and Danny are happy to, it's obviously kind of a joint decision. So we haven't thought about it other than the time that we said last week. Obviously, boxing is very much a moving dynamic. So at some point we did discuss actually on the live having guests on as well too. So definitely not a no. Just got to figure out a way to deliver that to you as well. Mucky says, I love Derek, but I don't want to see him anywhere near Dubois. DB Cooper 1 says, could you please spar Charlie Parsons? Spark him out, Ayman, please. Boxing Fraternity, thanks to you in advance. A nice one. There's room for everyone to do their thing in boxing, I guess. I believe Charlie's had quite a few sessions with Anthony Croller, I think it was. I think Charlie was going to appear on Misfits, so I wouldn't back Charlie to not be handy in the ring. I think he's got a bit about him, to be fair. So, yeah, I'm doing a bit myself at McCracken's gym, more to just lose a bit of weight, but at some point we're going to turn into technical sessions just so I can learn a bit more about the sport. I've got no interest in actually fighting in the ring. Aaron Tony, that's a new name, haven't seen that before, says, I want Derek to iron Triple D in 4 rounds. We'll put it in the poll if you're backing Derek to win. Charlie Parsons, aka Josh's future employer. I think Josh is staying at Seconds Out for now. Secret Dance Move says, great fight. Big fan of Del Boy and Triple D, so it's perfect final fight for Del. Last one before I give you my thoughts on this fight. Big Chungus, big fan of Big Chungus. Would pay good money to see the Carninator versus Josh Hart attack. I don't know what amounts for good money these days, but keep it in your pocket for now because I think you might need it for a rainy day. Right then, back into the boxing conversation, and the topic was Daniel Dubois and Derek Chisora has been ordered by the IBF for the heavyweight title. Look, I don't think this fight is ever going to happen, which is why I think Derek Chisora is, and I think Derek Chisora is all up for it, and Daniel Dubois would all be up for it as well. But that's why there's a lot of noise being made about it, because I think the undisputed heavyweight title fight, the second time round and the second time round for Usyk and Dubois gets made. So that would mean that whoever wins that would have to take on the there's another title in ahead of the IBF. Can't quite remember who. Is it the WBO? I think it is the WBO. And I believe Joe Parker holds that status. So I believe that would usurp that, and that would take Derek Chisora past his 50 fight. So I don't think Derek Chisora is in line for the fight. So I don't believe it ever happens. What does concern me is Frank Warren saying there's a big fight happening in the UK, and that might mean that if for some reason Usyk isn't ready or whatever it may be, or there's an injury or whatever the case is, Dubois does have a fight out in the UK, and that might mean that Derek Chisora does come in. Look, I don't. You've got to be honest here about the fight and analyze it and taking it for what it is. I don't see Derek Chisora being a favorite in this fight by any means. I think Dubois is a strong favorite in against a fighter who Derek, even a few years ago when people were talking about him retiring, and he's clawed some really good wins against Joyce and Otto Wallen. He's put them in the win column for him. He's still taken a lot of punishment in those fights, and the image of him kind of running, I guess, or at least shuffling as fast as he could away from Joyce in that final round still buries deep in my mind, because that was what it took for him to get over the line. Wallen must kick himself, or I don't know what Wallen was doing in that fight, because that wasn't the way. Even if I can't remember how I had the fight going, but even if you'd backed Wallen to win or backed Chisora to win, you'd still backed Wallen to put up a much better fight than he did. And you'd say that that's a style that might cause problems, or you want to see Dubois under that intense and heavy pressure. But I think Dubois is just way too fresh, way too much of a threat, an aggressive threat in that ring. And Dubois doesn't quite have the nous either to, I guess, kind of see the fight for, look, this is someone I could handily beat here. Maybe I'll take him a few rounds and then get the victory, like how Tyson Fury did at Wembley. Dubois is someone who comes in and it's a Terminator type of mindset. I just watched Terminator the other day, but he sees the target. He looks to seek and destroy by any means. It's me or them type of attitude. And I think Derek would be in for a very bad night if that's the case. So that's not a fight I want to see. I see Derek, even outside of that, I see Dubois' as boxing skills as being able to handle what Derek can put in front of him, and this being a faded version of the prime Derek Chisora. Got to give immense credit to where Derek has put himself, the position he's put himself to. I cannot say that I don't see a route for Derek Chisora to win, because, like Josh has mentioned, I think there's a bit more than a puncher's chance, because people will still put a little bit of a mark on Daniel Dubois and that aggressive type of style, that aggressive from Derek Chisora's point of view. I think there could be a way for him to win, but it's a real stretch, I think, if I'm being honest about it. So I would rather see a different opponent in the opposite corner for either men, but more so for the concerns of the health of Derek Chisora. I'd rather see him fight someone else. But again, let me know your thoughts on that one. There is an interesting dynamic, though, in this fight as we move on to the next topic. And that is the cornerman of Daniel Dubois was the longtime cornerman of Derek Chisora. Don Charles credits Derek Chisora as being the man to get him into the industry and really open the door for him. And he counts him as someone close and dear to his heart. And that would be very much, I guess, what's the word I'm looking for? A little bit of a push and pull in different directions for Don Charles if he finds himself in the opposite corner to Derek Chisora in one of his final fights. Don is someone who's a friend of the channel, and I guess he wouldn't. I don't want to speak for Don too much here, but he wouldn't shirk any challenges or shirk any, I guess, tough moments. But that would be something that would be an interesting dynamic, considering that the history between the two fighters. And I remember putting it to Derek, actually, would he want Don in his corner in his final fight or final fights? And he said, no, that chapter's kind of closed and I'm with shoot fighters now. That's Alexis Dimitriadis and the team there, which is more of a MMA type gym. And he credits them for being the resurgence of this latter portion of his career, but firmly kind of closed that chapter on it. But it would be somewhat poetic that Don Charles did figure in some way in those final two fights, but it would be in the opposite corner. What would you think, and what would you add to the conversation when it comes to Derek Chisora's chances, knowing that Don is in the corner for Daniel, who's managed his strengths and brought them up and tried to hide his weaknesses in the ring to get him victories that he's got, to get him opportunities that he's got. When you add into the mix that there's someone who knows the best of him and the places that can be got to for Derek in terms of game planning, what does that mean? What is it a recipe for when it comes to that fight? Is it a tougher task for Derek?
I would say so, yeah. I would say absolutely is, because Don is going to know a hell of a lot about Derek. Like you mentioned, both his strengths and his weaknesses. And the one thing that I think Don will excel at is putting together a game plan to expose those weaknesses, especially if he knows them as well as what we like to believe he would, which only makes it an even more dangerous task for Derek Chisora, which is why I know people are making their arguments that they want to see the fight, but I'm still going to stand on the fact that I don't want to see the fight. And even more now knowing that, because we know how good Daniel Dubois is. And if Daniel has that clear game plan where he knows, okay, Chisora's weak here, he's weak here, he's weak here. Or even worse, he turns Derek Chisora's strengths into his own strengths and makes Chisora's strength Chisora's weakness. Bit of a tongue twister, that. It just makes it a really tough night for Derek. And it's, like I said, it's one thing going in there with someone who's like an average mild puncher at heavyweight, but this isn't no average mild puncher. This is the most destructive fighter in the heavyweight division at the moment, in my opinion. When you look at what he's doing at the top level, we've seen what he's just done to Anthony Joshua. It really doesn't sit right with me. I don't know how the IBF even decided that Wallin versus Chisora was going to be a final eliminate, and especially knowing the fact that that we are now at that final chapter of Chisora's career, and he said the whole time he's not really fussed about the world titles. I don't even think Chisora wants to fight for the world titles. Chisora's just a madman who wants to fight everyone. For as long as he will be in boxing, he'll want to fight everyone. But I do genuinely think that going down this road with Daniel Dubois is the last thing. If I was in Derek Chisora's management team, I would be saying, no, let's steer clear of this one. Let's look at a different type of fight. I think the Joshua fight makes more sense, to be honest.
Yeah, I think outside of the Usyk fight, you'd want to see a rematch between, outside of the options, I guess, that are being presented, you'd want to see Joe Parker in there. Martin Piccoli before this fight with Joe Parker would have been a real good opponent. Fabio Wardley would be a good opponent as well. But you're talking at those sort of names who, I guess, Wardley hasn't been at the top yet. Coley hasn't quite got there since his defeat to Michael Hunter, and he's kind of working himself into that opportunity, and he had to take a short notice fight, but they took the opportunity, and you can't really begrudge it given the amount of money and the possibility that was on the table for him, but they're working themselves back into that picture. Joshua, of course, it was a real exclamation mark in terms of that ending, but there was I believe, a rematch clause in that fight, or at least a lot of talk about the rematch happening from a anti-Joshua point of view. He said he wanted that fight. But it doesn't seem that that'll be the case because Joshua is injured, as we're aware, and Eddie has said that it's. I think you asked him, Eddie. You asked him, Josh, didn't you?
I think so. Sorry, say that again.
Or at least you were in a huddle with Eddie Hearn, and one of the reporters, I think it was you, but one of the reporters asked him who or where the injury was to anti-Joshua.
Yeah,
and he sort of kind of little broed you a little bit, didn't he? He was like, "What did he say to you?"
He said, so I asked the question after speaking to Mr. Flexen about what would you like me to ask Eddie tonight, and he just said, ask about what the injury is. And I was like, that's an appropriate question I'll ask because we've been told about this injury, but we're not hearing a lot about it, so it's only right we go and try and get the answer. And Eddie just straight up said, I'm not going to reveal those details, but it's an injury that makes him unable to punch to his full powers. So make of that what you want. I think you can kind of identify the injury somewhat. So yeah, we don't fully know what the injury is, but if it's an injury that's affecting him from punching, then you'd presume it's somewhere around his arms. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's a safe and fair presumption, but that would mean that anti-Joshua is out of the picture for the moment. It wouldn't be him in the opposite corner to Daniel Dubois either. So you're really kind of looking for or struggling for a big name opponents for like a stadium type of fight or those big type of opportunities, because that's what you think Daniel Dubois now is kind of looking at in terms of fights off of the back of how that fight with anti-Joshua ended at Wembley, no less. So that is one to wait for and see what happens there. Let's move back into the chat and the conversation here as I find where we last were. So Secret Dance Move says, also let Parker fight Usyk. The older Usyk gets, the better for Triple D when he rematches Usyk. He also says, we have to talk about Brian Norman Jr. He's a real threat at 147 now. Brian Norman Jr. isn't on the list of topics today, but feel free to offer the contributions in the chat and I will get to them. I did see a little bit of Brian Norman Jr. I was just about holding on for sleep the other day, but he looked good in his victory against Cuevas, I think it was. And Cuevas, I think, buzzed him early, didn't he? But it's a nice little win for Brian. We'll see if he gets a fight with John Ennis. Stats Killer says, move not for neutrals. I think that's in response to Parker versus Usyk. Brian Norman wants Jin Sasaki in Japan, and then Josh Taylor in December if he beats Echo Esselman. DBK1 says, yes, bring guests back. Bring that big, massive Irish lad back. He was a good laugh. Donna Corby. Donna is welcome anytime, of course. I was maybe looking to see Donna tomorrow. I think he's going to see the Hoosiers or what's that band that do the country music? I can't remember the name of them. Going to go see them live in Birmingham, but I think I'll be elsewhere getting a few interviews. Secret Dance Move says, I don't know the fight, but I guess it's mandatory too, so Triple D has to fight him. Thanks, Ames, in response to Des coming on. Des, let's go. Not just he seems like a reprobate. Me and Justin had a good conversation about Watford players of the past. I don't think he is a reprobate, just a fellow who loves his boxing. Toby Bartlett says, just make sure you don't get knocked out first, Josh. Would be embarrassing getting the big build-up, then asleep on the job when the camera pans around. That would be funny, not embarrassing. Stats Killer says, I don't like Usyk versus Dubois fight either. We've already seen this ish. I won't say that. Jack Dutton on the 45 says, I think the WBO are going to strip Usyk for not defending against Parker. Be a bold move to strip Oleksandr Usyk, given that a undisputed fight is being talked about. I think undisputed, I know undisputed will usurp any sort of mandatory defense. So I think they'll give the opportunity to make that happen before they look to. I mean, the negotiations seem to be a lot more easier since Turkey Al-Sheikh's figured into the picture. So it's just wait and see on that move for the moment. I'm sure we'll get some updates in the next week or so. Del has always given everyone a good fight, with the exception of Fury and maybe Hay. Yeah, and Triple D was robbed against Oleksandr Usyk. That old debate. Well, debates could get settled if that undisputed fight gets over the line. Unless Usyk ages overnight, he is getting on in age. Aaron Tony says, "I want to see Triple D against Del Boy." Fair play to you. Red Eye Jedi 420 UK. That's what we all said about Joyce in reference to Derek Chisora maybe being someone who is on the close of his career. Is that what you're in reference to? Aaron Tony says, and Parker beats Usyk. Interesting take. Chisora has only been given manager status because the IBF rescinded eliminated status to Bakoli versus Jagba fight. I think the two are still fighting though, aren't they? Styles make fights, says Red Eye Jedi. Delboy isn't no big baby. Delboy will rough up an old man him. Dubois knocked out Usyk. There was no schooling. Interesting debate going on here in the chat. Yes, and Dubois knocked out Usyk. How hard is that? The less of the insults, more of the debate. Debates can go freely, but everyone is welcome to their own opinion. But less of the insults if you can, gentlemen. Okay. There's still that is going on, and that is its own. We need 3 judges for that one, I think, Josh, because that a little debate in the chat is rumbling on. And we will rumble on to our next topic of conversation. Before I do that, I'll give you a quick update on the poll. And the poll has maybe shifted, not by much, by 1%. It's still Daniel Dubois in the strong lead. 66% of voters have gone for Daniel Dubois, with 34% have voted Derek Chisora. Get your poll votes in. This weekend sees another conversation and another heavyweight fight of a similar conversation, and that is Joyce, who was due to take on Dillian Whyte, who pulled out with an injury to his finger. The team have gone back to the drawing board and thought about the opponents that they could face to make 1, a good fight, and 2, a good opportunity to launch themselves back into the heavyweight title picture, which they were in before they crossed paths with Zhilei Zhang. And the choice that has been made is none other than Filip Hrgovic, who has 1 defeat to his name, and that 1 defeat comes to Daniel Dubois. Now, the question I want to ask to yourselves in the chat and to you, Josh, in a moment is, have the team made the right choice in taking Filip Hrgovic? I can balance up the conversation and balance my point of view with... I thought that Joyce would have been the favorite in the fight with Dillian Whyte, and that's probably not a popular opinion given Joyce's fights previously. But having seen Dillian Whyte really labor and not really have the potency and his power in that famed left hook of his, I thought Joe Joyce would be someone who still has a lot left in the tank to come through in his style. We all know what his style is, and get the victory against Dillian Whyte, either by points or stoppage. I saw him in a real opportunity to get a good win under his belt against Dillian Whyte. And I know there are a lot of claims and a lot of calls for Joe Joyce to retire, and those arguments, I can see those arguments for them, and I know that Joe Joyce and his team will say no, you retire in return, actually, for that. But I know that they're again essentially defiant, and they see themselves as only a couple of wins away from getting another big opportunity, and I can respect that. I can get that, but I think that in picking Filip Hrgovic, I think that sways the balance of how the fight was quite well balanced when it was first put to us with Dillian Whyte. I think this is a tough task for Joe Joyce to get the victory. I don't say that he can't get the victory, but I would be favouring Filip Hrgovic in the fight. And it's a fight where, with Joyce's ability to take shots and Filip's ability to take shots, I can see both gentlemen shipping a lot of shots. Filip Hrgovic has got a very, very good chin. Look at the amount of shots he delivered to Daniel Dubois, who took them and then received from Daniel Dubois afterwards. And that fight was stopped on cuts, stopped on 2 cuts. And the word was that I can reveal to you if you didn't hear beforehand, as I was saying before the fight, and I think after as well too, that one of those cuts was sustained, I think the week before the camp, in the camp, before the fight, but they felt that it wouldn't outweigh the opportunity and the money they were receiving, so they went ahead, of course, with the fight, and that opened up in the fight and caused a problem. And Filip Hrgovic has recently said on, I believe it was on Box Nation, that he felt like he just tired after the early rounds and just didn't have it in him, and the cuts were a real problem for him. But he stood there, he was stopped on his feet. It wasn't a punch that had dropped him or by any means. And we're talking about Daniel Dubois, who's now in a position to take on the undisputed champion, or not the undisputed, you know what I mean there, but in a position to fight for the undisputed title, and very much revered and feared for his punching power. It's very weird talking about Joyce, considering that he's a man who holds 2 wins, one over Daniel Dubois, who's in a lofty position, and now Joe Parker, who's in a lofty position as well. And that's, I guess, the logic for their teams picking Filip Hrgovic. They'll feel that because of that, they feel that Joyce can get those wins, rack up the wins, and put himself in back in title contention. But I just feel that this is in amongst that conversation. You've got to get there, and by getting there, you've got to take a lot of punishment to get there. I think Joyce has sustained a lot of punishment in sparring and in fights, and his exciting style means that he will do against Filip Hrgovic. I think it won't be enough. I don't think he has enough left in the tank against Filip Hrgovic to rack up the victory than I did think he would have against Dillian Whyte. So I'm a little bit worried, I guess, about this fight, to say as concisely as I can. Josh, what do you think about this fight coming up this weekend?
I actually somewhat favour Joe Joyce this one. Forgive me for my light quickly. The light battery has just died, so I'm about to turn the other one on. There we go. I favour Joe Joyce going into this one for the simple reason in the fact that I don't think Filip Hrgovic has the defence, and I'm not saying Joe Joyce has the defence, but I think we could see one of those fights that we saw from, I guess you could say, a Joe Joyce in his prime before the Zhang fights, where he will be able to just grind him down. I don't think Hrgovic will have that power and that punch behind him to keep Joyce off. I know Chisora kind of didn't have that punch and power to keep Joyce off, but I think if Joyce just takes a few things from those fights and those defeats and tweaks a few things, I think he can make it a really, really awkward night's work for Filip Hrgovic. I don't think he stops him. If I'm being honest, I don't think this fight goes inside distance. I think this fight will go to the distance and it'll be a winner on points. I think it just comes down to who can wear the punches better, because I think it's a fight where it's evident that they're both going to be blocking the punches with their face mainly. So it just depends on who can take the more punches, who can land the more punches, and who can control it a bit more. And I favour Joe Joyce going into this. I don't think Joyce has enough to compete at that top level still, but I do think he has enough to get himself back in the mix. And I think a win this weekend over Filip Hrgovic, which, in my opinion, is a better fight than Dillian Whyte. Dillian Whyte had a bit more intrigue to it, because there's always intrigue and excitement when Dillian Whyte comes around and fights in the UK. But I'm more intrigued by this Filip Hrgovic fight. I think there's a lot more riding on the line, and Filip Hrgovic won't roll over and is going to be eager to make that statement himself to get himself back in this world title picture, especially after the Daniel Dubois defeat last year. So while it's a fight that maybe the casual fans won't get behind as much, I think it's better. And I am going to, in my opinion, I'm going to back a Joe Joyce win this time. I do think Joe Joyce can get his career back on track properly this weekend. So that's what I'm going to stick with.
Very interesting, Josh. We have a little bit of a split on this panel. So I want to get you guys' takes in the chat. We've got a poll already here. We're not closing that poll, but give me the name in the chat and I'll read it out, because I want to know who's got the finger on the pulse here. Am I right in thinking that this is a real tough fight and a fight we should worry about, or has Josh Hart got the finger on the trigger here and is right? So give me a name. Give me the name Joyce, or give me the name Hrgovic if you're backing as to the man that you're backing. Josh, when you talk about Joyce being someone who's the favorite in the fight, can you give me the split as to how you see the fight?
I'd give it a 60-40 in favour of Joyce. I'm not saying it's guaranteed he wins, but I do give him the slight edge in the sense of I don't know how well Hrgovic is going to respond from this defeat to Daniel Dubois. Because, like you said, while he didn't get badly knocked out or anything, it was a very demoralising defeat in the sense of he was just outworked in the end. had a lot of good work early and couldn't get Dubois out of there. And Dubois said, right, well, I've took yours now. It's your turn to take my big punches. And that's what he did. So I think it's very interesting. It's a very tough fight to take for a comeback fight as well, especially off the back of a defeat that wasn't the easiest to take. So that's why I make Joyce the favourite. But then again, Joyce is also coming into it off the back of a defeat. But I think there's a bit more sting behind the one with Hrgovic, and I don't know how well he'll be able to bounce back from that.
Fair enough. I am going to. There's a little bit of a fight breaking out in the Seconds Out chat, and I'm going to put you to. It's like two children. I'm going to split them and put them in a little bit of a timeout, just so that everyone else can get their contributions in. So no picking sides here, but both you gentlemen are on a timeout for the moment. As we get back into the boxing chat, we do appreciate your contributions, but just less of the back and forth bickering, I guess. DB Cooper One says, my sources tell me that AJ's injury is simply him knowing his worth, aka no point getting out of bed for anything but fury. Risk-reward ratio post-Dubois KO isn't worth it. Well, is that what maybe opens the door for the Jake Paul fight? Because that's his worth in terms of getting the commercial value for him in a fight outside of Tyson Fury? Is that why that's been the move to have these conversations, albeit in the smallest way? Is that what's opened the door for it because the Fury fight isn't there right now? Or is it a ploy to push for Tyson Fury and for the people who are paying for it to be a bit more urged towards that way, off the way that Canelo was so close to fighting Jake Paul? They might feel like Anthony Joshua is so close to fighting Jake Paul, might pay that extra bit of money to get the fight over the line and get Fury out of retirement, or get AJ paid however way it falls to get that fight over the line finally. Porter, I wonder if it's Sean Porter, but Porter nonetheless says Dubois will send Chisora into. Don't want to end it with that, but there's a lot of people kind of feeling that it's a fight heavily weighed in Daniel Dubois' favor. THAME and Fame, maybe. Chisora took so much damage. I wouldn't be surprised if he's always suffered brain injuries. That's the brutal side of the sport. No doubt that if you're talking about brain injuries, one of the ways to suffer them is by taking repeated blows to the head. There's no getting away from that. We, of course, hope that every fighter steps into the ring, steps out safely and back to their family. Big Chunga says, secret dance moves. Settle down, guys. Come on, kiss and make up. That'd be great. Thunder Road asks, who from Seconds Out is covering David Adelaide versus Jamie TKB? Now, this is on the undercard of the Joe Joyce versus Filip Hrgovic fight. I believe it's Radio Raheem and Frank Warren. So if you've missed your Radio Raheem fix, do not worry, as he will be in Manchester reuniting with Frank Warren and the heavyweights as well. Whilst we're on the topic of the undercard here, Josh, I'm just going to run through it here. What takes your fancy? You got Jack Rafferty versus Corey O'Regan, Joe Joyce versus Filip Hrgovic, we've discussed. Adelaide versus Jamie Shakiva for the vacant British heavyweight title, now vacated by Fabio Wardley. Jürgen Oldejaj versus Gerardo Milado. Khalil Majid takes on Alex Murphy. Wilson Barney-Smith versus Cesar Ignacio Paredes. Mark Chamberlain back out against Miguel Scaringi. Nelson Birchall, I heard a lot about the Birchall brothers, against Rodrigo Arico. Alfie Middlemiss versus Alexander Morales. Delicious Ori's debut. Ramton Musa's debut. And Luis Zeto's debut. A lot talked about Delicious Ori, who's a heavyweight as well. Home of the heavyweights, Queensberry Promotions. And Ramton Musa, a lot talked about him off of the GB circuit. Josh, I presume that you're going to run with Adelaide and Jamie Shakiva as the fight that takes your most fancied.
Yeah, in terms of the title fights on the card, that is one that does intrigue me. Because it's a fight. When you originally looked at it, I thought, yes, it's a good English title level fight. And seeing it up for the British now, it's a big step for it. Obviously, Adelaide does have that experience in a British title fight, sharing the ring with Fabio Wardley back in 2023. And for Jamie TKV, this is a big step up. Hasn't competed, obviously fought in his 10 rounders, but hasn't. Well, I don't really think I saw much talk of him being in that British title picture, but he's made his way there. He's beat some good opponents on the way. He's racked up some good wins since suffering that first defeat of his career. And it's a fight I'm really interested in. I have got a bit of intrigue as to how it goes. I think you make David Adelaide a slight favourite, but I wouldn't write off Jamie TKV completely. But I would say this is more of like a 70-30 in favour of David Adelaide. And I'm also intrigued by the delicious RA Pro debut as well. Good fighter from the GB squad, linked up with Pierce Giljan and Grant Smith at Steel City. I think that's a great move. It's a great stable that they've got over there, and Delicious RA is just another great piece to that gym. So very excited to see him kickstart his pro career this weekend as well.
He could have moved to WWE as well.
Exactly, had a big move there. So I'm not as big of a WWE man as some other people here. But I'm sure that would have been interesting, but not as interesting for me. I'm glad to see him go to the pro scene instead. I think he can do big things in this heavyweight division.
Maybe there's a way for him to balance a WWE commitment, maybe a couple of times a year, and boxing as well. That would be an interesting, interesting background for a fighter. I've never seen that done before. Porter says, "My man punches faster than Joyce," and she's been. Well, we won't. Joyce versus White would have been closer. This is what I think. I think Joyce versus White would be a much more winnable fight for both men, much more closer fight for both men as well, too. Much more competitive fight, I believe. For me, Filip Hrgovic and Joe Joyce is a lot less competitive. Again, I'm not saying, and I'm not writing off Joe Joyce's chances. I'm just saying it's a less competitive, less better made fight. But that's what happens sometimes when fighters pulled out. You're often scrambling for opportunities. Richie Rackpour pulled out. Sorry, not Richie Rackpour. Lawrence Okoli pulled out of his fight with Richie Rackpour, and maybe they were scrambling for opportunities, and that means that they couldn't find a fight, and Richie Rackpour finds himself off the bill completely. So you do have to give a little bit of slack for promoters when they're making events and trying to entice punters to buy tickets. I do get that side of things, but I think they could have gone with something a little bit more competitive. Porter says now Joyce has lost his chin. He's lost his chance at glory. We'll see if he's lost his chin, because Filip Hrgovic is going to find out that for us this weekend. Thunder Road says, is it Modfather Vinny or Frank today? The question that everyone's been asking in the chat in their minds. Just Thunder Road had the actual gumption to ask it, and the answer is it is Modfather. Actually, I'll let you know. Does the Modfather want to put their name into the headline here to give us the answer? That'll be a fun way to do it. They can reveal themselves that way, and you'll find out shortly. I'll give them a little bit of a task. DBC Heavyweight Boxing says, surely not this fight. Surely it is. We are going to see Joyce versus Hrgovic this weekend. DB Cooper 1 says, the Joe Joyce downfall needs to be studied. Was on the edge of a world title / huge fight. Sad thing is he has to keep fighting because financially he hasn't made it yet and turned pro too late. I don't know if that's the case. I don't know if Joyce has or needs to financially cover himself by continuing to fight. It's a good question. It's a good thing to ask. If I was there, or next time I get the opportunity to interview Joe Joyce or Frank Warren, that's something I'd ask if they'd be willing to reveal that as well too. But you do often wonder why fighters continue to fight on. The lure of the heavyweights, the lure of the money that's on offer, especially now in this landscape, is very much enticing, and you can understand why they'd want to continue, want to push on, especially when they were so close to a big opportunity. Back then, before Joyce fought Zhilei, a lot of talk about him and Anthony Joshua and how that fight would go. Those two have sparred countless rounds, of course. But that was how close he was to a world title opportunity, and it just didn't materialize. And that's boxing. Sometimes it's a risky game. You climb up the ladder and you can fall down ever so quickly as well too. The Modfather hasn't revealed themselves. I'll give another minute to do so, and then I'll reveal their name for you, Thunder Road. Next message comes from David Hyde, who's backing Juggernaut Joe. He's put the name in, and he's gone for Team Josh Hart in backing Juggernaut Joe too. Daniel Dubois says, both these guys are useless. As for Joyce and Hrgovic, however, good fighters. I think he's alluding to myself and Josh Hart. If we're useless, Danny, then you're in good company. Sporkley says, or Sporkle, I'm glad that idiot called Secret Dance move was banned. I shouldn't have read that out. Dara O'Malley says, is Bakoli Ajagba still a final eliminator? As far as aware, I don't think it is still a final eliminator. Good question. We'll find that out, but I believe it's not the final eliminator. But the fight is continuing on. You gents are back now. Secret Dance gives a little jab back to Sporkle. Hopefully, you guys can leave the bickering to to Wilder. You guys are back, and move Norman would get battered by Conor Benn. You guys are funny. Here we go. I think I'm gonna have to. Seconds out. I'm moving on from this wall, and it's still carrying on. I'll give you another opportunity to just move on and leave the bickering, or you will get another ban, and the ban will be 5 minutes. I can't believe Daniel Flexen leaves for one episode, surely to return next week, and everyone's bickering and having a back and forth in the chat. Come on, boys. The boxing is in the ring. The fighting is in the ring, not in the comments section. Darren Malley says Joyce should have fought Wallin after Parker. Matchmaker has to take the blame. Yeah, there was talk about, and when I'm talking about competitive, when I'm talking about fights a bit more closer to that sort of 50-50 element, maybe you'd view off of how Chisora beat Joyce. I know that Chisora since fought Otto Wallin, and Wallin didn't put his best foot forward for that fight. But would you look at Joyce versus Wallin as a more competitive, even type of fight? Would you look, and here's one of the names that was discussed, would you look at Joyce versus Tony Yoka as maybe a more even and competitive fight? Would you even look at Joyce versus Deontay Wilder as a more even and competitive fight? Let me know what you think in the chat. Here we go. Seconds out. He said it. It is Modfather Vincent Valentine's. Hope everyone is good in the chat. So Vinny, Modfather Vinny is revealed. Next time anyone sees Joe Joyce, so Joey makes it how much. I won't quite ask it that way, DB Cooper 1. I will ask DB Cooper 1 if you subscribe to the channel. Salute Vincent says Thunder Road. I'm glad Vincent Valentine says Big Chungus. And the two are still bickering on. So you've made me do it. You've pushed me to the limit here, gentlemen, and both of you are. No, you're right. I think here. Let's have a quick look. Yeah. Okay. So this is what's happening. Both of you are getting a 5-minute ban there in the chat. Right then, moving on to our last topic. I mentioned about Deontay Wilder. Josh, you were messaging me so late you couldn't hold your excitement back, and that was because you heard about the return of Deontay Wilder. The heavy-hitting bronze bomber is returning to the heavyweight division. We wondered of the future of Deontay Wilder off of the back of consecutive losses, the most recent one being to Zhilei Zhang. And now Deontay Wilder comes back to the ring 27th of June against Tyrell Anthony Herndon. I can't say I knew too much about Herndon, but I did see on social media that Tyrell Herndon had been manifesting and wanting to be in a position of idols become rivals. I think he put that social media post out nonetheless. And Herndon just pulling up his box rec here right now. 24-0, 24-5 with 15 knockouts, 4 knockouts, 4 losses by knockout or stoppage. His last stoppage defeat was against Richard Torres Jr. in 2023, and has since racked up a couple of wins in Colombia and in America, and has now found himself in a position against Deontay Wilder. Feels and looks like a tune-up fight to see where Deontay Wilder is, to see if he can find the bronze bomber, because it is a steep drop in the level of competition going from Fury fights in 2020 to Joe Parker to Zhang to now Tyrell Herndon. No disrespect to Tyrell Herndon intended, but back out in Wichita. Last heard of Wichita in a famous White Stripes song, Seven Nation Army. But are you excited by the return of Deontay Wilder, Josh, against Herndon?
Yeah, I'd say I'm excited to see Wilder back because the heavyweight division is always in a good place when Wilder's around. I think Wilder's such an exciting figure of this division, just given his unique ability to knock people out the way he has been, or it was in the past anyway. And I think fights like these are perfect. I speak to Javier Miller quite often, and he's someone who has given probably the best take I've heard on it, and saying there's no shame in Wilder going and taking maybe 2 or 3 of these types of fights to gauge where he really is. We're not going to find out a lot about what Wilder's got left based off one fight. It'd be stupid to watch this one fight in June and go, yeah, Wilder's back. Let's gun for these big fights again. Give him a couple of these. Give him another one maybe in September. Let's have him spend the rest of 2025 in these easier fights. Look at 2026, and that's when you give it that one final big run if that's what they want to do. At 39 years old now, time is against him. There's not a lot of time left in this career of Deontay Wilder. Looking at his box record, he's had 48 fights now. There's not much left to do. He's held that heavyweight title, but there's nothing wrong with going for it again. And hopefully, he can find himself again. He can find that the real bronze bomber, not the bronze bomber that we've seen as of late, who looked gun shy. He has looked very gun shy as of late in his fights with Parker and Zhang. We need to get that Wilder again, where he's not scared to let that right hand go and detonate that bomb. So hopefully we can see a bit of that vintage bronze bomber in June. But yeah, excited for the return. And it would just be interesting to see what he really has in that tank now at 39 years old and 48 fights deep into his career.
Yeah, I mean, it goes a little bit further than just what is left in the tank for Deontay Wilder, not just in the physical sense, but it's more the mental aspect with Deontay Wilder, because it's not just the concept of this fighter might have lost it and then them reaching and getting it back, but more that he taken himself out to, I guess, one of these undisclosed locations where you can take ayahuasca, I believe it is. And from what I've seen and what I've heard about ayahuasca, which is limited, maybe you guys in the chat know a little bit more than I do, or people listening to this back, let me know in the comments as well too about it. But I believe it's supposed to change your way of thinking, or really be a real life-changing experience, and one that I think they go as far as to say like remove ego or take you on a path where they say the experiences last for days and days in your mind, but really you're living hours, which is just a crazy even thing to comprehend there. But off of the back of those kind of life-changing experiences and moments on a spiritual and mental aspect, how then do you factor yourself walking back in the shoes of the life you led previously? And I wonder if that's the battle that Deontay Wilder is facing right now. And he has maintained that there's still that there, but it does feel like when you look at Deontay Wilder, the way he acts, the way he speaks, it's not with the same conviction as the one that came into those fights with Tyson Fury. And both those men have been changed by that fight. They put on a hell of a spectacle across 3 fights, but and that might be the legacy that they have and hold on to. Tyson Fury, of course, went on to fight Oleksandr Usyk in 2 very close fights, but that was something that they'll be very much remembered for when they both hang up their gloves. Again, I mentioned there about the riches, the landscape of the heavyweight division, the fact that Deontay Wilder carries such a explosive, detonating type of power, which seems to have been neutralized to a degree. Joe Parker was able to neutralize it by pushing Deontay Wilder onto the back foot, and Zhang was able to neutralize it by simply taking it. I think he weighed in heavier. I think the key is to weigh in heavier to take the shot. And once you can take that shot of Deontay Wilder, look, you don't want to still take too many of them, but once you take that shot from Deontay Wilder, there isn't much coming back after that. We're not looking at a fantastic left hook and a shot to the body and a real razor sharp skill set from Wilder. We're looking at one big, heavy right hand. And once you're able to move out of that in any way that you can execute your defense, then it really is on the onus is on you to get that victory. So it might be the case that Deontay Wilder's just been figured out. And at what level has he been figured out? And it's the levels of the type of Herndon, again, no disrespect to him, that can also figure him out. And if you're losing at that level, then you have to say, really, it's time to call it a day. But we'll wait and see. We're closing up onto an hour now of Seconds Out Live, which is usually the time to close the show and give Josh Hart the opportunity to give his final thoughts. But I will come to the chat for one final time before I say goodbye to you guys. Darren O'Malley says, what next for White? Wilder Ruiz Miller seem like good fights. We need to know if White can fight in this country. He does maintain that he can, and that isn't an issue. But we haven't seen him do that yet, so we'll see what is the return for Dylan White. I would have thought that Dylan White, and if Fraser Clark racks up a win or two, Dylan White and Fraser Clark would be a good fight. He'd never fight Fabio Wardley because they're stablemates, but that sort of level of fight I think would be good. Big Gun says, I give Dell a chance because he's going to charge forward and swing. David Hyde says, against a half-decent boxer, Wilder gets found out. He needs to get his head in the right place and be more humble. Big Boy Garms, good to see you. Big Boy Garms. Wilder is a bum. Leaves USA, ends up on his back. That is it for now. That is it. Before that is it for now, we have the end of our poll. So, Modfather Vinny, if you could close up the poll and we can get the final results as to who the Seconds Out listeners have picked as their choice for Daniel Dubois versus Derek Chisora. Just waiting for those poll results to assimilate in front of me so I can view them. I will give you a spoiler just as they're populating. And the spoiler is that Daniel Dubois did lead the poll and he has won the poll. You guys have selected him. Daniel Dubois, 63%. Derek Chisora, 36%. I would have thought that would be a little bit more wider in favor of Daniel Dubois, but we did have a healthy amount of votes in there, so maybe it's closer to what the boxing public view as to the competitive nature of that fight. That'll do it for this week's edition of Seconds Out Live, though. Thank you for everyone for joining as I give Josh Hart the opportunity to think about what he's going to close with for his closing statement to you guys. But I will be out in the field very soon, hopefully, interviewing some of the biggest and best names in the sport. So do look out for that on Seconds Out Live. I'll pass over now, though, to Josh. Josh, what would you like to say to close out the show?
First of all, I'd like to say thank you all for tuning in again. It's been a while since I've last shown my face on here, but glad to be back in the hot seat talking about boxing here with Ayman. As well as keeping your eye on the channel for Ayman's content and Raheem's up in Manchester. Keep your eye on me as well. I'm down in London for GBM Sports as they take over York Hall again with a nice little card this Friday night. If you're looking for something to do, whack on the zone. There's a good little show on there. GBM Sports. Shakan Pitter's finally getting his long-awaited EBU light heavyweight title shot. I'll be there reporting live from ringside. But yeah, until then, thank you all as always for watching and hopefully speak again soon.